from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand.
What's up?
What's going on? We made it.
We're here. So good to see you.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. And your hair's looking all right. Are you cutting your hair back there?
Yeah. We're actually an at-home barber. My mother's helping me out.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no, I'm not a hat guy, but I've become a hat guy because of all this.
Yeah, I feel you. I like the Velocco too.
Thank you.
You.
Gotta rep, right?
Yeah, exactly. How you're at home right now? Everything.
I'm in my apartment in the city.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been here since everything started. My parents are out on Long Island though, so I went out there last weekend for the first time since this all started, just to kind of give them a wave really quick. But it's a strange time, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, talking about that, I think don't need to harp on the time we're in, but I want to talk about like how you are and how you are doing. Oh,
absolutely.
What's
Yeah,
up, little guy?
I'm no longer really the featured guest. Jovi is. She
famous
feels the
Jovi.
need to be on pretty much every call that I've had since March. So
I love it. How are you guys doing at the apartment? Everyone's healthy that you
everything's good.
Yeah.
Everything's good. Can't complain.
Good.
You know, there's definitely, and we'll dive into it. There's a lot of upside to be found through all this too. So
exactly.
You know.
Yeah, I want to ask about talking about the upside. How have you been finding different ways for creativity, whether it be like with writing or other stuff you're doing, besides just like work itself?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's all about goal setting, and not to sound cliche, because it's not like this started and I pulled out a piece of paper and started writing down all my goals or anything like that. But immediately when I started to sense that we were kind of in for something different, I knew that I had to challenge myself and I had to do something different. So for instance, for me, I challenged myself to run every single day, and I've run every single day since this started. And then that kind of took a next leap into, all right, I'm going to run 100 miles during the month of April. And now we've got 6 days left and I'm 85 miles in. So it's stuff like that, from both a personal perspective as well as a professional perspective, where immediately one of the things that I've been kind of drawn into since I was young, and one of the themes that I harp on in the book, is there's just so much opportunity to be found in moments of distress. And so one of the things that I don't like to say take pride in, but for lack of a better expression, take pride in, is I feel like I'm equipped to handle a downward scenario. And so like I've seen some pretty bad stuff in my personal life, right? Like
Exactly.
you know, like I'm equipped for this kind of situation, as the headlines painted, at least.
Yeah, no, that I think that's perfectly said, because you've taken so many like defeats or been through so many bumps that this like bigger bump is you've been around the ring before. And I think there's like, it's very stoic, but there's often times when things are going good, they say like have the practices where like you sleep on the ground at times, or like you don't eat for a day, just so you can get used to not having a lot. And I think that contributes to like these times, because you're just going to continue to roll through. Yeah, was there ever a hiccup for you, or was it just like I'm
no, I mean, I truth be told, the first day this started, I had a call with my boss, and this is not my personality, because, I never forecasted anything like this was going to happen, but I knew immediately how I was going to handle it. And I called my boss, and he was giving, one of those check-in calls to make sure everybody's all right, and like, surviving through what's going on. And I was like, Dave, his name's Dave. I go, Dave, listen, honestly, this is when I shine. I go, and I'm telling you right now, I'm going to be your top salesperson for the next, whatever period it is that we're kind of stuck in this, because, honestly, I just find ways to position opportunity, even for clients, in this kind of climate. And it all starts with being relatable. It all starts with the approach of, what do you need right now? What can we be doing to help you? And, the phrases go in with the empathy first attitude. you know, in terms of understanding that I'm not in this alone. You're not in this alone. But there are certain things that bring us together, whether it's the anxiety of perhaps feeling lonely in a moment like this, if you're by yourself, or perhaps feeling like you can't execute as well as you do around other people, setting goals, all sorts of things. And for me, like it was so natural to me, and
Yeah.
that was the good part of it.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because when we had someone else on the other day, his name's Sean Patel, and he talked about this time as like a value. It's a time to give value to others, where like after this you can start to actually sell people. But with you said, you still have to maintain clients and going at it with an equal playing field. I actually kind of want to get into that though. Like, can
Yeah,
you
no,
talk about selling
yep, sorry,
people
I didn't
and
mean to
like
cut you
helping?
off, but
Yeah.
Sean's absolutely right. The one thing that people need to take away from this is, if there's ever a time in any of our lifetimes where you can build goodwill, it's now. Like, whether it's with relationships, whether it's with clients, now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
call the people that need to hear from you, whether it's from a personal perspective or a professional perspective, and make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that a lot. And how has that been for you? I know obviously on a professional level it's all good, but have you been doing the exact same thing on like a self relationship level?
Absolutely. I mean, I tell people all the time that, especially when it comes to, you take certain things for granted, especially around like family. Like I've loved my family, and I've always had a good relationship with my family before any of this started. But
Yeah.
you know, the amount of attention that I'm paying during these FaceTime calls now with my mom, you know, I'm zoned in. Like I'm
You're
100%
present, yeah.
present, paying attention, interested. And it's not like I wasn't interested before, but you know, that's one of the benefits of this now, is that I don't take it for granted anymore. And I look forward to those FaceTimes, where before it was like, I'll call her later, or it can't be that important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like a huge perspective shift.
Yeah.
That was a click for me the other day. It was just like major perspective shift with certain like routines and habits. Um, I was gonna ask, did you have any upcoming races and stuff this year planned or no?
Yeah, so I was supposed to run the New York City half, which got canceled. And
Mhm.
then unt I don't think I didn't sign up formally. I mean, I was talking about doing other races, but I didn't sign up formally. My next formal race that I'm signed up for is in September. I am going to run the New York City Marathon again, pending everything is on for this year. That's my plan. But you know, even from a training perspective, I mean, this has kind of been a blessing. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
zoned in.
seriously.
I got more time, so I'm zoned in.
Yeah, I mean, and the gym is outside for you for the most part, so you don't have to worry about going somewhere
Yeah, I mean,
remote.
the one aspect is maybe like the strength part of things. I was working with a trainer before all this started, and so that part I've been working on my own, but I've been bringing it down to basics, focusing on my calisthenics, knocking out 200 push-ups a day, like it's Bible for
Wow.
me. Like I have to do that. Like the things that I've been consistent with is 200 push-ups and at least an average of 3 miles per day, just to kind of, you know, baseline it. Anything above that is great, but that's where I'm setting the baseline.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's what you talked about with the goal setting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, the cool thing about this as well, I didn't mention, is it's going to be archived, and we're going to throw it up everywhere on all the social platforms.
Great.
Yeah, so go back and look at all this. But the other thing I was going to ask as well is, I know we talked a couple things with like gratitude, perspective, being present. Has there been any glaringly clear lessons for you during this time, or just like seeing and
Yeah.
observing things?
Yeah. The number one glaring lesson that kind of came out at me and came at me pretty strong is that it's important to realize people handle this a lot differently, right? Like, I consider myself to be one of the outliers. Like, for instance, when the whole work from home thing started and everybody started working from home, the sentiment from a lot of people was, I can't wait to be back in the office. And the sentiment for me was like, this is great. This is when I'm going to shine, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, it took me a while to kind of understand and come to grips with the fact that you know, you have to sympathize with people who see things differently, and you have to sympathize and understand that certain people thrive in different atmospheres. And this is a disruptive atmosphere, but, you know, I'm not trying to discount that at all, but
Yeah,
not everybody shares the same mindset of disruption means opportunity.
exactly. Yeah. I like that a lot. There was one thought in my head. Oh, so it's funny that all this transpired, and you're looking at this scenario the way you're looking at it, because I often said, like 2 years ago, I was like 2020, can't wait for 2020. And it approaches and all this happens, and I'm just like, perfect timing. Like, thank you. Because it's just, you know, that after this, there's going to be extreme growth. And like, you've been through it, you know, leukemia at a young age, running a half Ironman, like you go through these painful periods, and then after it's just resilience and growth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, um, you know, pain precedes growth, and I always say,
Yeah,
yeah, the fall always precedes the rise, and I am one of those people who's hopeful that, you know, when this is all said and done, as a society, we learn a lot of lessons, we move forward in a positive way.
yeah,
And it's not just about, you know, one element or two elements. No, it's about the whole world kind of picking up on, you know, things that now we have more time to address.
yeah. And I didn't, I think since last time we talked, it's been a little bit, but you, before we, or when we had the podcast, you were going to release your book fairly soon. Like, how did, I didn't get to actually ask you, like, I know we talked a lot, but how did that process go, and how has it been? How are the, like, I'm sure people can really use the bookstore in this time as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. Yeah, so the book was officially published in September. And, you know, when I wrote it, it was, and we talked about this in the podcast, I think, it was my first foray into writing. I wasn't a writer, I had no literary background. I Googled how to write a book. And after it was published in September, to my surprise, it did a lot better. I mean, my expectations were fairly low, so it's not like I had high expectations.
Yeah,
But in terms of sales, it did much better than I had ever anticipated. So I sat on it for another month or so, and I decided to take a leap in the sense that I calculated whether or not it would be worth to hire a publicist, and that was crazy for me. Like, even the words or the thought of it was
yeah.
something wild.
How does that exactly work? Because you can keep going, but I
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah, I actually didn't know how it worked either. And what I did was I reached out to a friend who was a, you know, a celebrity of sorts, and I asked her. I was like, "Do you have any recommendations?" And she did. She made a recommendation for me. And as you can imagine, in New York, the market for a publicist is pretty crazy. And I
yeah,
didn't know that. Similar to how I didn't know anything around, you know, writing the book. And I just kind of put my business shoes on, did some negotiating, got it to a rate that I'm not going to say I was comfortable with, but that I was willing to kind of take a stab at.
yeah,
And yeah, and then I just basically gambled on myself for 6 months, from like, well, 5 months, maybe from October to March. And then once COVID happened, you know, I had a very transparent, and the publicist was also very transparent around the fact, like, hey, like, right now we just don't know, things are slowing down. And especially because a lot of what I did was events based and you know, in
yeah,
person, it wasn't necessarily going to generate the opportunities that we were seeing prior to that. But the biggest part of it wasn't necessarily like the scoping out how to get a publicist or the price shopping. That stuff was all new and different at the time.
Mhm.
But really, it was the whole like, when am I ever going to get a chance to invest in myself in this way, right? And it is a significant investment in terms of time, money, resources,
Yeah,
and considerations. And at the end of the day, if you ever hire a publicist or a representative or anything like that, you know, there are some that are really good out there, but even the best publicists out there, you have to do your part, right? And you need to make sure that you're controlling your messaging, and that you own the information that's going out there about you. And so you're not off the hook when you hire a publicist. You still have to do work and kind of get your side done.
yeah. Because, well, that's like all for one, awesome and like interesting. But I want to dive deeper too, because say for example, you know, I even know people who like really want to write books, but
Mhm.
not only it's like sometimes there's a fear of actually doing it because it's a daunting thing, like writing a book, but then
Yeah.
also like the process to doing it. So what's like the step by step, and like, can you talk about the role that, like, how does the publicist actually work with
Yeah.
what they do?
So for me, um, one of the things that I learned very early on in the book writing process was that if you're in the book writing process to make money, it's not about book sales. Book sales are actually like pocket change. Where you make money as an
Okay.
author is really more from speaking. And so when I originally wrote Break Barriers, there was no, like, my objective was never money. It wasn't like I'm writing Break Barriers, that's it, I'm going to make a ton of money and retire. I didn't think anyone was going to buy my book, to be completely honest. We already talked
Yeah.
about that. But then when I started to see that sales were coming in, I decided to think it like through a little bit further and talk about, and think further, excuse me, about what the objective of the message was. And the message was, to help readers channel the mindset to overcome different obstacles. And ultimately, I thought to myself, well, there's really no better way to do that than in person. And there's no better way to do that than to kind of practice what I preach and show it to an audience, etc. And so that helped me, become more comfortable with taking that next step and
Yeah.
hiring a publicist. And when I hired the publicist, that's another element of it. You can hire a publicist and you need to direct them around what your objective is from a business perspective.
Yeah,
And my
because
objective,
they
yep.
they they control, what do they control? Like the editing and obviously like the distribution and messaging of it, or
No, what they're kind of like your representation for like getting you marketing opportunities and speaking engagements
got
and
it,
like
got it. Okay, okay.
controlling your social following, etc. So I had told them straight up, I was like, listen, I don't care how many Twitter followers I have. In fact, I'm not even looking for Twitter followers or Instagram followers. I go, what I want you to do is help me build legitimate partnerships with brands that can help me push forward this message in a meaningful way. And from a business perspective, let's build a speaking platform. Let's see what kind of companies would be interested in engaging in this kind of material, and let's build that platform out. So that was my objective when I hired the publicist.
Got it. Yeah, it's funny because before we talked about perspective shifts, like once you did that, it seemed like the process was relatively easier, which is pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, no, it's a mix, right? It's a calculated risk. The process does become a little easier, but you're investing more. So you need to think about like how calculated is this risk? Like how much work are you willing to put in to hire that help, and then how much work are you willing to do when you get that help?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was cool too because you got a couple of speaking engagements, and I'm hoping with things. Has anything been virtual so far? I feel like that's gonna sort of take off when things even go back to the way they used to.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that, is because there was so much uncertainty around what was happening at first that we held off. But now, like, as of
Mm,
this week, like the meetings are, all right, where can we get booked virtually? Because
yeah,
we didn't know how long this was going to last, and we didn't know what the appetite was going to be like. But now, like, I'm taking my shot at different angles and going about it in different ways, trying to see what opportunities we can get, even from a virtual perspective.
nice. That's great. Yeah, you gotta adjust during this time. Change is a
Absolutely.
constant. You know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to do a quick update on just to know your goals as well. So we talked about the career thing. I know you're going to be the best salesman during this time. We talked about the races being on a halt. Are there any like bigger goals you've set? Because you reached the one with releasing the book, but is there like readjusted goals obviously at this time?
Yeah, I mean, in the short term, that 100-mile a month goal, that's what I'm
Yeah,
going for right
almost
now. So that's
there.
so almost there right now. Working on that. And then, I think from a grander perspective, it's not necessarily more, I wouldn't call it a goal. It's really been a learning period for me right now around the Break Barriers brand. Because when March came around and when this first started, I took a step back. I was like, hey, man, no one wants to listen to you talk right now. Like, what are you doing putting this material out? Everybody's more concerned about what's going on in the world, etc. And it was only within the last like week or two that I started to kind of become more and more comfortable with, hey, my message can sync up with what's going on right now, and I can figure out a way to draw a synergy between the two. And so that's been the new focus. So I wouldn't call it more of a goal. It's more adapting to the new environment and learning where I can find pockets of opportunity for the Break Barriers brand.
Yeah, there was a little lull, and that makes sense. But it feels like the meta, like overall feeling in the world is like what you just said, and I saw what you've been doing on LinkedIn as well, like showing that the message is useful. How was that? I want to delve into the actual click in your head. Like how did that process work? Where you were like, this is my story. I already know that. Like I really want to help people. How did you work through that?
So immediately when this all started, I knew that the messaging could not be about me. Like I knew that 100%. Even though the Break Barrier story is about me, I knew the messaging couldn't be about me. So fortunately, I work for Salesforce, and Salesforce is an extremely philanthropic company. They have a lot of charitable initiatives, and at the very essence of the core business is giving back, and it's just a big part of like what the CEO preaches, etc. And the good thing about the company is there's a lot of open access. So like I was able to access the C-suite pretty easily and shoot a note and say, hey, like what can I do to help? Like can I donate proceeds of book sales? And I knew they had a ton of charitable partnerships. And the chief philanthropic officer actually reached out, and she said, hey, like these are some of the companies that we work with in New York, City Harvest being one of them. And so from my perspective, I said, all right, now this works, right? Like my message is getting out there. It's going out there for a good cause, and City Harvest is going to benefit out of this. I didn't see a single dollar from any of the book sales that came about during that period, but it kept the message alive in a period when perhaps I would have kind of hit under the radar or kept it dead or not talked about it out of fear of being insensitive.
Got it. Well, yeah, it's at that point then it's okay because you did it out of not wanting to be selfish in a way.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. That's really cool. It shows your humility, but it shows too, as you take a step back, things line up. And I think that's where the world is at.
Yeah, I mean there's always like I think it's from a business perspective, it's always important to kind of know when to take that step back. And there are periods of times where you can be full pedal to the metal around like pushing your product for sales, but then there could be time where you could be full pedal to the metal pushing your product for exposure. And right now, I think the objective is more so exposure around, hey, like you might be encountering different obstacles in your life at this point in time. Here's a tool in a book that might help you kind of channel the mindset to overcome. And in the process of that, if you buy the book right now, know that it's going to a good cause. And so that's basically how I approached it.
Yeah, I was also thinking as well, have you thought about making, like eventually when this is over, making content around or from the book and putting it out? I know Ray Dalio does a good job where he has this massive book and there's sections in it and he just continually posts about it. Have you thought about doing that to like just continually spread the message on social?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I definitely think about doing that in terms of taking excerpts from the book and really honing in on certain chapters, certain elements. I personally, I need a push sometimes, like, and this is where I get help from people like my publicist, because sometimes I feel vain doing that in the sense that I'm just talking about myself, and I need that extra push from a third party that says, no, well, if you position it this way, it'll impact the broader audience. And so was it, I know your cousin introduced me to The Third Door. Were you the one that introduced it to him?
I think so. Yeah.
So Alex Bannion, the author of The Third Door, that was the last book that I read before I wrote Break Barriers. And it got me really, before I published Break Barriers. So I read it while I was writing it. But it really fired me up because I really liked the way that he put the story together. And I liked his story as a whole in general. And I remember in his book, even he talks about the fact that he didn't know how to get a publicist, and he got rejected about 30 times before he finally got his shot. And it was just what I needed to read right before I published. But I bring that up because he also does a good job of like reminding his audience of like certain segments of the book and the messaging that he has put forth since
Yeah,
publishing.
that's true.
Yeah,
that's very true. I do see him posting about certain excerpts that are relevant.
yeah,
That makes sense. It's cool to get the full context behind it, because I remember getting tagged when you were like reading it on your stories, but it's cool to see how impactful that was.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of goals, like talking about aspirations, I see that same thing playing out in terms of speaking engagements. Like he's done an amazing job with speaking at these big places, and it's cool to see grow with Google was a big opportunity. Hopefully more things like that come.
Yeah, no, Grow with Google was a super cool opportunity. I actually got that opportunity through the Wolico family. One of the members works for Grow with Google, and she was setting up events for other people, and she asked, and I jumped on it. And it was cool because the level of intellectual curiosity in that room was probably the highest out of the majority of audiences that I've spoken at. You saw people from all different landscapes, all different career routes, startups, people that are more established in their careers, working for corporations. And it was cool to sit alongside two of my close friends, Eric, the CEO of Swerve, Megan, who founded a company called Ripe, and present the message in tandem. It's one of those moments in life where you're like, how did I end up here? And I'm up here with two of my friends, which is kind of cool.
That's so
and
cool.
At Google. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so cool. We have a question here. What is Break Barriers about? Yeah, if you want to give the context for people who haven't heard about it.
Absolutely. Break Barriers is a memoir that I wrote. I hated using the word memoir, but I was forced to start using it. And I wrote it with the objective of helping readers channel the mindset to overcome different obstacles, personal, professional, on the playing field. It's based on my personal story. When I was born in Egypt. When I was 3 years old, I was diagnosed with leukemia. And I talk about the mentality developed between the ages of 3 and 13 undergoing treatment as a young immigrant child, and how that helped lay the cornerstone for navigating adult life.
Love that every time. Yeah, so on that note, I'm giving my own plug. Get the book. Perfect time to get the book.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you guys know if you want to ask any questions as Nahal did, that'd be great. And if you're on your mind regarding writing, training, anything about Bishoy. But was there anything else you wanted to bring up as well? Like any other things that's been like illuminating inside your head during this time?
No, I think that the main things are really around being mindful, of course, about how different people are adapting to this kind of environment. I'm always going to be one to promote seeking opportunity in moments of disruption like this, whether that means, doing something that perhaps, I talked about, for instance, running 100 miles in a month. And you would think that I had already done that with all the marathon training that I've done, but I realized that I've never actually done that. And so, yeah. And so even if it's just something small like that, in terms of setting a small goal for yourself, something that at one point you didn't necessarily have the time to do, it's just building up that energy or that reservoir of realizing or uncovering potential is something that you should definitely drill down on, during this period. Because what's going to happen is, if life does resume back to normal at some point, you're essentially missing out on an opportunity to tap into what you're capable of in one way or the other, just from a timing perspective.
Yeah, I resonate with that so much, because it was the other day when, you talk about training. I still had the aspiration of doing the Ironman later this year. And it's like, you don't want to do it at times, but it's those moments where you can decide that I will get it in and I will do it. And it's like those moments that build you into like a tougher callus in your head and stuff you've been through, like to an extreme extent in your life, you know?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, and I would really kind of hone in on that, and I would encourage, you know, anyone that's listening in right now that you know needs personal tips on seeking out opportunity. I know there's a lot of people who want to seek out opportunity in moments like this, but struggle with it. To reach out personally for that kind of conversation, because I'm always happy to kind of feel that. I always tell people that it's just extremely important to warm up to the idea of discomfort, because you know the more you get assimilated to it, the more you start to learn about yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Everyone I've talked to, we did like all these Q&As so far on IG Live. Every single person has talked about how they've gotten to know themselves on a deeper level, and it's just amazing to see. I was going to ask as well. It's a very overarching question, but can you talk about like the specific as to why seeking out discomfort is the way to go? Because it seems like, you know, why would I go out of my way to put myself in pain? But I would love for you to touch on that real quick.
So it's not a scientific answer, it's more of a personal answer, but the personal answer is, you know, I've learned over the course of a lifetime that every time that I've sought out discomfort, I've been really happy with the response in terms of what I've uncovered. And so whether it be from a physical perspective, from like an athletic perspective, or from even like a professional perspective where I've taken on roles that at certain points I felt highly unqualified for. And what I learned is I can do it. And not only did I learn I can do it, but I've also learned how to handle my mindset around the people around me. Because, you know, you kind of go into those roles sometimes thinking, you know, you're down on yourself thinking you can't do something. And then you look at everybody else and you're like, I definitely don't belong around this group of people because like they're rock stars. But you slowly, after kind of doing that time and time again, uncover the fact that everyone's figuring it out, you know, and some people may be further along when it comes to certain trajectories, but you have to keep an open mind around putting yourself in those situations. So like the reason why is because it's 100% been successful every time for me. So I have to talk about it as a proven concept.
Yeah. I'm so happy the way you answered that, because I was just going to ask, there's those moments where you have the imposter syndrome because the unknown is scary when you go into those painful situations, but you hit a grand slam with answering that one. But yeah, I appreciate that a lot. And I think that's like a beautiful note to end it on, because I know there's a lot of ground covered here, but I think that's a good way to cap it off and have people go away with something like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's awesome to talk. And please, guys, if you don't even buy the book and don't even check it out, just like follow Bishoy. Always putting out positivity. Continue to be a light. But I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. Have a good one. Take care.
All right. Bye.